Welcome to Knowing and Believing Season 2. No religious words. That's what I'm kind of calling it, I guess.
Nice.
I'm really excited about this, just to give an explanation of what this is going to be now. I've written out the concept because I can wander all over the place, so I'll just read it. And then I'll introduce who this guy is sitting across from me after that. So, concept here is, what does it mean to search for and wrestle with the concept of God while avoiding the use of religious words? In this season of Knowing and Believing, we put the dangers of a lexicon and vicarious justification for faith aside to see what we can hold on to. We will do this by skeptically focusing on intellectual acceptance of one religious word at a time while authentically wrestling towards belief. So this requires trust between myself and Shawn that we're actually working towards the same goal, while honestly starting from maybe different foundations or different areas on the gradient of how comfortable you've become intellectually with faith or able to defend what you believe. I would say maybe is a good way of looking at it. And I honestly want to move more towards belief, but struggle with that intellectually at this point. So I guess that's a fair, quick summary of the idea behind this concept. So before I go on too much, I was thinking that I would give an intro for you, and you'll have to give an intro for me.
Okay.
So, not to put you on the spot, would you like to go first, or should you like me to go first?
I will go first.
Oh, no. Okay. Go for it.
So this is Trent Bell, and he is a photographer extraordinaire who does architectural photography. Is that
Primarily. Yeah.
Primarily. Okay,
Yep.
primarily.
Yep.
He is married to Amber, most importantly, I would say.
That is a significant part of who I have become,
Yes.
or been able to become.
And the father of
and
Simon.
avoid becoming.
The father of Simon and Grayson.
Mm-hmm.
Trent went to Andrews University in Berrien Springs, Michigan. I know that much. I think you went to a place called Shenandoah Valley Academy in Virginia, who I will be hosting at my church this weekend, by the way. That's another story. And let's see. You are the son of a pastor and former church administrator and professor.
Mm-hmm.
And you live in Maine.
Mm-hmm.
And you're an all-around great guy. So there you go. That's my introduction. Did I miss some key?
The end
parts
was a
of
little off there, but all right, yeah, that's I accept all of that.
Okay, all right, okay.
My introduction will be a little more personal, I guess.
Oh,
not
I feel like
not in that sense.
No.
My interpretation of how I assess people
Okay, all right.
is how I would introduce you to encourage people to trust and accept what you will say without ever meeting them.
Okay.
Yeah. The thing, I've never heard you preach, I don't think, that I can remember, which is an insulting thing to say.
That's
if
all
I've
right.
Heard you preach.
Preaching is actually
don't know.
not like people make a big deal about preaching. It's not my
But
most notable.
You could have, from my perspective on Adventism, you easily could have been one of the higher ups in the mega church of Adventism.
Wow.
Yet for some odd reason, you seem to have chosen to make real community, real relationship, in my perspective, a foundational filter for your decisions rather than a career potentially that might pull you to notoriety. It seemed you made the odd choice of insisting and staying with a geographic area and a people for some reason. And to me, that holds a lot of honor. That says something about someone. Now, aside from that, I've always heard like that, you know, from the interactions I've had with you, you've held up intellectually, which is great. And to know that you can rattle someone's cage, as I often try to do to get to know people, and there's not really rigid bars that affect the interior. That there's a degree of unshakableness because of the intelligence and degree that things are thought out, is what I perceive when I interact with you. And so I've always, just from hearing what other people say about you, for one, and to see your choices, but also your potential, and that the potential was there and given, but there were other choices that maybe framed family, community, and true meaning to come before those things, which to me is like, that's the resume
Well, thank
of a
you.
person.
Trent, man, you're making me blush.
Oh,
You are too kind. Now I feel bad about just giving the facts for you. And I will say that
not very many people know me though. And we haven't like
Yeah.
hung out as friends that
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
And no one would typically give a intro like that. I get that.
yeah.
So
Well,
yeah.
Well, thank you, Trent. I feel humbled by your kind words.
You had a post on Facebook that really resonated with me, only because of my own self-centered reflection on my experiences. But I had gone through that feeling of moving. It always annoyed me that people would ask you to come and help them move when you pay people to do everything else. I couldn't comprehend why. It wasn't until I went through the experience of leaving a home that I had been at a long time, and that's that last time you walk out the door in that space where all those memories happen, is empty. That's just, whew. So then I realized that's why you bring your friends in. But yeah, I don't know why that. Okay, stretch. It's good. There's a weirdness to being honest with your emotions that allows for a pull of deeper intellectual acceptance that I have to try and make myself when I approach this, which leads to this. So sorry.
No, man.
What were we saying?
Well, for me, like, being a safe person is one of the most important gifts I want to give to people. So maybe that's what you're
not
picking
going to
up.
leap across that table at me. That's good.
I don't think so. I don't think so. But it's been, we maybe have talked about this in the past when I've been on this podcast before. That's been a process for me. So like, I don't know if you remember much of me from like 25 years ago now. Oh my goodness. But I was not that same person.
No, I've only ever really, known you through some of the, few conversations that we've actually had. And I've simply always appreciated that you have a presence when you communicate with people that is, I can tell that you're not somewhere else thinking typically, that you're actually here thinking, which is hard to get with a lot of people. But I mean, that's also a good trait to have for your profession. So maybe that's why you ended up being this.
Yeah, I think certainly I love doing what I do. So, and I feel the same about you, Trent. I feel like you are a genuine seeker after. The term truth kind of has a lot of baggage. You are a genuine seeker after beauty, and beauty is truth. So
Yes.
So anyway, that's what I really appreciate.
These are good starts.
Yes,
These are good starts.
Yes. So so that's why I love talking to you as well.
Cool. So an interesting thing about our interaction, coming from who we are, is that we are kind of mirror images of each other in a sense, in that you have a high degree of interest in photography while being a professional, very philosophical theologian, in my opinion, while I am a professional photographer while having a lot of interest in the, so we're kind of the 60-40 balance in that anyways. So
your proficiency at theology, philosophy is far higher than mine is in photography. So, but we'll just leave it at that. We'll just leave it at that. Like you're in both accounts, you excel so much more as a photographer than I do as a pastor, and you excel more as a theologian than I do as a photographer. So, anyway.
Yeah, but I fall flat. I shouldn't even say yeah, but I don't know that I accept that compliment. But I would fall so flat on my face if I had to deal with human interactions with grace. I am only valuable in very deep honesty, which is very offensive to a lot of people. And so I have to just shut up a lot. So, which is fine, but I'm just learning how to do that, which is great. So
there you go.
So that's kind of who we are as people, for people listening to two guys that they don't know. The next thing is to kind of to share a statement of belief, but then before we really even can do that, we need to talk about, briefly as possible, what is belief? Why do we have a word for belief when we have words like knowledge? There's a definition in there that is an emotional admittance as to the relationship that you have with the concept being voiced, right? So knowledge is of a more solid, empirical thing that can be certain, that can be handed from one person to another. A belief, to me, I hold emotionally more like a projection based off of knowledge. That's kind of where I would put
Yeah,
belief.
I might actually push back a little bit about your...
And that's what this is all about.
Yeah.
Pushing back and reassessing what I see. And so that kind of thing, I hope, will be very common.
Yeah. So your claim that knowledge is something that's maybe more empirical or you can pass on, I would say there are types of knowledge which aren't by definition necessarily that. But that's
That
another
aren't.
story. Yeah, that aren't that.
Right.
So-
in a general sense, what would you put in those categories as a analogy?
Well, I could say I know that I like to eat Taco Bell. Right? Like I can't pass that on to you. I can't.
Right. Okay.
I can't prove that to you.
Subjective empirical truth.
Yeah.
sense.
There's something called tacit knowledge that's like you just know it because you know it.
Right.
An analogy that I've heard used is that like if you had 1 million people that were just in a crowd and you were to say to Trent, pick out your wife from this 1 million people, you would be able to do it immediately. But if I didn't know your wife, I already
would
do.
just
of course.
listen for her laugh.
There you go. But you like if there's somebody else who had never met your wife and you try to describe for them, okay, you're looking for a person who blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Like there'd be a very low chance that they would be able to.
So
pick her up.
it's a high degree of plastered right up against subjective experience.
Yeah, it's
that's
experiential
consistent,
knowledge.
That's only mine.
Yeah. So anyway, that's where I would.
There's a sacredness to that. I would imagine that there's the most personal, closest knowable truth, and especially in using it in a wife category of thought, I understand and then also am able to frame the negative of what people do with the truth of that when they break that, or when they use it to manipulate it to experience different things. Experiential, to pull that experiential thing into what you're saying as far as tacit knowledge, then makes it clear to me. Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, just want to put that aside for 1 second. But
Yeah,
that's
a great like bubble category for me to have floating out here, that this is empirical for the person who's claiming it. As long as they can be honest about, for me, this experience is true every time, but the knowledge that I can't pass that on to you, like the ability to say this is tacit knowledge. Some people wrongly place tacit knowledge in things that can be passed over to other people. So
Yeah. I guess part of what I'm getting at, this is kind of just where I am in my own thinking, is that there's an assumption that sort of empirical knowledge is a superior form of knowledge. And I might be tempted to be a little more postmodern.
Okay.
In the sense that like we have almost like made this power play that derived from like the Enlightenment, where these people believe that you could just exhaustively know things. And I think many people are kind of pushing back against that and saying, well, yeah, there's empirical, rationalistic thinking and observation and so forth, but maybe that's not as certain as we thought it was.
That's such a hard thing to then outline, because the very thing that you're talking about is the thing that people have an extremely difficult time perceiving. And it's just such a, it's wandering into the fog, kind of swinging at things.
And that feels unsettling.
Yeah, but, when you're in a boat and you enter into fog, if you continue as if there's no fog, you're in great danger. But if you slow down to under 10 knots and honk the horn every 30 seconds, it's a lot more likely that you're going to be safe. So when I come to using tacit knowledge, I use that as if, in one sense, I can use it as if I had enough of an idea of the area that I'm going through in fog, if I've done it a million times, I have a greater ability to use that tacit knowledge with grace and stick the landingness. But even so, it's fog, and it's subjective, and there's going to be a high degree of talent, emotion, response time, or desire, development, pull left or right. You can think of that analogy in so many different ways, that your ability to grasp, hold on to tacit knowledge is just an ephemeral, very ephemeral thing. It's it's a consciousness truth of experience, but it's not empirical. It's not, but at the same time, it's that such deeper value that comes from complete experiential knowledge, I guess. And my youngest son, Grayson, is just very much like me, that if he can relate it through doing or through experience, then he knows it and can do more with it, but it's much harder for him to learn it in the initiation of that knowledge. So higher degree of cost, but the tool works more once he's able to make the payment. So
yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I think part of what I'm just pushing, so I believe in like the reality of some sort of objective reality, but I'm just wanting to promote the idea that we need to be a little more humble about our ability to grasp that. And it's like our knowledge is provisional. Like I don't, I assume the existence of God, of course, but outside of God, I don't think any of us have, like, as some have called it, like the view from nowhere. Like none of us have none of us have a God's eye view except for God, right?
So a view from nowhere is a view from everywhere.
Yeah, I guess you could say. Yeah,
that's zero and infinity concept as well.
Yeah. So like we're all growing in our knowledge, and I don't think we'll ever exhaust it. So that just encourages humility in me, that I see, to use a term from the Bible, like we know in part, right? Like this is what the Apostle Paul said, we know in part. So I want to be humble about the degree to which I feel like I grasp an idea. That's not to deny the reality of the thing itself, but it's just for me, I want to recognize that my knowledge is provisional, and there's always more to learn, and I'll never master it, because I am a contingent, finite being who is not all-knowing. So that's kind of why I put it in those terms.
Yeah, no, that the intellectual humility but also the fire at your heels is that too much intellectual humility can get a pastor in trouble.
Okay, why is that, Trent? Tell me, help me out, because I want to avoid the pitfalls of.
This is more of a warning for you that I'm sure you're already aware of, but are having a hard time admitting because you get a paycheck from a church. But when you have to straddle it, not in your experience as a pastor, but in my experience as a pastor, you have to
your experience as a pastor.
Being concrete in your thinking and belief to appease those who would be more conscientious or conservative in your church.
Yeah.
and then much more lovey, wishy-washy to those who'd be more, open. So there's this.
Well, I would say this is where belief actually comes into play.
Yeah.
Which is what we first started trying to talk about. So for me, I still like belief. To me, to go back to your original question, is confidence.
Yeah.
Is trust, but there's a difference between that and like certainty to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I still believe, and I place my confidence in ideas, we'll put it that way, even though I can't prove them beyond a shadow of a doubt, right? So like I still speak with confidence of these convictions I have, but I still, there's a certain level, again, of provisionality about them that I can't prove them, but I nevertheless choose to place my confidence in them.
Right.
So that's a very, in my mind at least, a very important distinction. So humility by definition recognizes the limits of its own capacities, and so it reaches out to something outside of itself.
To me, if I were to, sounds like an odd thing to say, but if I were to embody a concept that feels like how you relate to the rigidness or certainty or reality of your beliefs, probably has a high degree of, if you were able to pass your hand through magnetic fields and feel them. It's like you do it enough times, you feel like, yeah, there's obviously right there. I can feel that. You know how when you'll move a magnet across something and boop, it's there.
Yeah.
Can't see it, but by using this idea or ideology that has outlined these magnetic points of moral interaction, ways to live your life, ways to interact with other people, just simply an advisable moral code that then says more about reality, as well as giving you that moral code. You start to get a clarity to know in part from what first person experiential knowledge you can have by just simply, living your life as a magnet through and then running into these metal points of draw and knowing that that's going to be a real big draw that I need to be careful to not get sucked into. This one's more benefit, and that kind of cleans your lens, focuses your lens on what's beyond, and your knowledge of that and your experience with that over time and being very present and working with other people and actually studying people through ministering to them has given you your projection of what lies beyond our experience that you believe in. And you have a high degree of subjective experience of interacting with that as well to back up what you believe and what you speak of. So
yeah, I think that's a good analogy. I'd say that's pretty accurate.
Yeah, and I constantly find that I have a hard time dealing with people on a shallow or friendly level that would tell you so much of all that stuff. I always go immediately to this kind of introspection and analogies, and that doesn't really give you a consistent read of people to pull an idea of a projection of what's beyond. It's a different way of interacting with life that has its own complexities and benefits. But for someone like me, I'm in a point in my life where now I come to struggling with this idea of what is belief to keep it moving along. So I think we have a clear idea that belief is something that is not knowledge, but that you have a certain degree of relationship of confidence to that thing actually existing. It is a gradient percentage type of relationship to acknowledge the confidence within the thing being discussed. So
I think that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. And
so I would even, some might think this is a cop-out, but for me, like, belief is almost like hope. Can I put that into
when my kids ask me what or if I believe, I tell them I certainly hope.
I think that's fine.
Yeah.
I think that's good. Like that's sometimes I'll frame it that way. Like I believe in God because I hope God exists. Like
I'm 100% there with you on that.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and I would even say, like, from a biblical perspective, this is one of the ways that faith is defined. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for, is how one of the biblical writers frames it. So
the hang up there then, though, is to what degree do you clearly interpret the Bible with any degree of certainty? And then the projections of character by the teachings that might be a little harder to explain within the verse, depending on how your then concept of God, no matter what belief system you come from, can be formed into a very detrimental thing to where someone can say, like, how could you hope to be under the guidance or whatever of an entity that would suggest these type of things? But that depends on how you interpret things. So for a discussion much further down the road.
These are big, long questions that I don't have great answers for. I mean, again, we'll get into this later, but certainty is not something I'm necessarily after. Like certainty is not a very important thing to me. Being right is actually not that important to me. I know that sounds crazy, but you know, and like the idea that like we want to feel we have strong reasons for why we believe what we believe and so forth. And that's all good. And there's nothing wrong with that. But for me, there is a great deal of subjectivity that I can't transfer to anyone else.
Yeah. Yeah. Now explain more, like, I hope I kind of got you in an uncomfortable area. Why it's not that important to be right? Because if you have, a certain type of person that is under your ministerial authorities, to hear you say it's not that important to be right, that's
unsettling.
That's one of the cards coming out from that tower that's going to be really bad. And so how, from a highly conscientious mindset, which I'm not, but I know some people are, which is, I am not besmirching that character at all. I am so incredibly happy that there's people out there that are of that disposition, because we need people like that. And if we tried to get people to do what they do well for all of society, like me, society would fall apart. I'm not that type of person to do what they're called to do. Their value in outlining what is truly out there in belief comes more so, in my opinion, in the immediate maintenance and preservation of that which allows us to actually navel gaze. So,
and that's a good thing.
Respect where deserved. But I do think that there's a humility in intellectual and belief issues that can be hard for a highly conscientious mind to admit, that would not respond well to hearing their spiritual leaders say that being right is, potentially maybe not the most important thing.
Yeah.
And
so yeah, I'm glad you say not the most important thing.
Yeah, it's important, but maybe not the most. But how do you defend that?
Oh, man. It's funny you ask, and it's my fault for saying that, because I was thinking
just walked right into that.
Yeah. No, I was actually, there was somebody I was speaking with last week. I don't remember who it was. I talked to so many people who I started to articulate this for the first time. I was like, I don't really care about being right. And I was like, I had never expressed it to anybody, but now I've expressed it to you. So here we go. I think, first of all, it's admittedly a reaction to where I used to be. Okay. So maybe it's a pendulum swinging, but I used to be, and I know sometimes I'm harder on myself, my former self, than I need to be, but I definitely used to be a lot more preoccupied with making sure that I was intellectually right and correct. And I want to correct other people who weren't intellectually, theologically, doctrinally correct. So that's where I came from. And now I'm like, I don't like that space in my heart, my thinking, my interaction with other people. And so that's part of the story. Part of it too is just, from a kind of intellectual history perspective, it's going to come out a lot in our conversation, but I have a lot of problems with the Enlightenment, the period of history that, started in 17th century and so forth. That this obsession with being correct, that, because really what the Enlightenment did was they basically, to be highly simplistic, believed that human beings could solve every problem that had ever been presented, and just using the right tools of observation, empiricism, rationalism, and so forth, that they would arrive at, to use a theological term. I know we're not supposed to be using theological terms here, Trent. Although
we can use them in passing, and we'll hit a buzzer and put them up on a board to talk about later.
But if I define them, then that's fine, right? So
but let's stay away from them in the major direction of conversation until we accept them in, kind of thing. But yes.
So omniscience.
There's not actually any real rules here, but there's principles.
So omniscience, all knowing.
Okay.
To believe we could know everything. That's kind of one of the heritages of the Enlightenment. Is that of ourselves, we can just...
You would think omniscience is a theological word?
No, I guess not. But it's what I always hear it.
I imagine it as a concept.
Okay.
But I mean, impossible in an empirical way.
What's that?
I would imagine omniscience impossible in an empirical capability manner. That I could conceive of. But I mean, give us a million years, who knows?
But this was basically a aspiration of the Enlightenment, was like human beings can progress to such a point where we can collectively grasp all knowledge. We can know with certainty. We can, there's no corner of the universe that we can't conquer.
But I mean, the argument could be made that with what we currently know, we don't hold any information that would empirically tell us we couldn't. So we can make that assumption while knowing we're going to run into the thing that will prevent it.
Yeah, I mean,
somewhere.
I guess we can make that assumption, but that's what it is, an assumption.
Yeah,
right?
and my idea would be that maybe that mindset of the Enlightenment was appropriate for that time.
Yeah.
To get the pendulum to start going this way. And then as it goes too far, then we get way more wishy-washy and we go back the other way. And then we get way more empirical. And
no, I agree with that. Like, there's a certain level we wouldn't be using these microphones, these lights. Like,
people didn't get all empirical about it.
So yay for the Enlightenment in that regard, right? But every era, every movement has its pitfalls, right?
Yeah.
And so what I think is that the Enlightenment, one of the negative consequences of it is it didn't instill this humility, although in some ways it should have.
It takes some arrogance and ignorance to get anywhere. Yeah.
It's a good way of putting it, ignorance as well, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm so stupid to have thought I could have been successful as a photographer. So stupid.
But here you are.
But I was dumb enough to do it.
Yeah.
And I would never at this point think I could do it.
Yeah. But so where I come from here though is so Christianity, I would say, adopted these Enlightenment assumptions, ironically as a way to
weren't the Enlightenment assumptions coming out of Christianity and working more towards the idea that truth is outside of us and it's good to objectify it more and more and more?
Yeah, I mean that's certainly one way you could look at it.
And maybe it's like Christianity went like this and then something else and then Enlightenment and then
but certainly I don't want to use that term. Every time I use the term like that in my writing, my academic writing, my supervisor says, you might want to scratch this word out. But anyway.
But it feels so good.
Especially in 18th, 19th century American Christianity, it was a lot of a reaction to this heavily rationalistic Enlightenment empiricist form of thinking.
Yeah.
And so Christianity adopted the Enlightenment
Culturally,
hook,
in a
line, and
sense.
sinker,
Yeah.
which then, by the way, this is another topic for another day. Fundamentalist Christianity, in many ways, pushed back against the Enlightenment way of thinking,
Interesting.
but adopted the ground rules of
Right.
the Enlightenment.
Right. The emotional holding of was adopted, but not the same.
Like the certainty, the dogmatism.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm coming from. I'm like, okay, being right is not as important to me as being loving.
Okay. Full circle there. Yeah.
So that's where we're coming back to, is like, I want to be a person who embodies correctness, not someone who is obsessed with proving correctness.
The objectification of a thing has its time and place, and until then, it needs to be lightly held in the subjective. So when the experience comes to a complete ability to be fulfilled, like in its time, and I can understand truth being revealed when appropriate in that sense.
Yeah.
And so to say like, well, I know this. Well, it might be that you know that, and it might be appropriate for you to abide by that now, but other people might simply not have the strength or the other knowledge base that are the steps to getting to being able to hold and follow through with that knowledge. Whereas getting the knowledge before you can actually follow through on it might be more detrimental than not having to be ladled with the guilt at that point to be able to get then. Way off topic there.
Well, I would say, like, from a theological, biblical perspective, if you're using the term know or knowledge, like, again, I'm a Christian, so knowledge, biblically speaking, actually isn't like glorified to the degree that maybe we would think it would be today. Like, it places more emphasis on faith, on confidence, on belief. Knowledge often...
Confidence is a dangerous one.
Okay, we can explore that in a second. Let me finish this thought.
Yeah, no.
So knowledge from a biblical perspective a lot of times is a lot more subjective.
Right.
And Adam knew Eve.
Exactly, yeah.
And what happens? They have a child. So anyway, confidence. What's wrong with confidence? Because to me, belief and confidence are the same
is
thing.
effective in executing something with little ability to have to think about it.
Okay.
Which can be really handy at times and extremely dangerous at times.
It can be foolish at times.
Yeah, and it can make you not check your own ability in something. But is, from my experience, something that is extremely important to have at the same time. So it's a very, very difficult thing to hold. You can't let it, you can't hold it too close. It's something that you have to constantly be looking to undermine, almost, just almost. It's no different than probably something like fame or admiration from people who don't know you. Like, what right do you have to?
So what I hear you saying is you're talking about like a self-confidence almost.
Yeah, I mean, as a form of self-confidence, but also confidence of the clarity of your experience, because even your experience is still so tainted by your level of emotional growth and development. If you're a person that's extremely didn't have the underpinning of love and confidence throughout your life, and have areas of need that can be met, that need to be met, that should be met, you're going to obviously be much more willing to fill those more quickly when they're in pain and needing to be bandaged. So I believe that religion is a really good method at, a first aid situation and potentially a long-term care situation of the human condition. I don't deny that, but there's triage, and there's different types of treatment. And okay, now lifestyle might be your best treatment, but this person needs to stay in the ER. And yeah, so that's all there. So belief, I think we've kind of like, okay, we get it. There's knowledge. There's different types of knowledge, which is important for us to admit between each other in this type of endeavor. That what was the one that was up here? Tacit knowledge, and then there's empirical knowledge that Now, moral truths are essentially empirical knowledge in that you can say, when you do this, this will happen. Now, it might take a long time for you to be able to test this in a laboratory of life experience, but this is what will happen, Junior. Know that. I hope you don't have to test it in real life.
There's a cause and effect.
Yeah. And it's something that you can test, over time. So I would admit that there's a degree of empirical knowledge to subjective experience, and no. Oh, come on. So next thing would be to say, as a person, together pulling this conversation towards a clear definition of truth. So people know the projection of beliefs that you have, they're outside of what you can empirically really, put your hands on. What are the things that you believe that are important, to try and keep it within a minute, No, that's not fair. Because I've got, with keeping it within 3 good paragraphs would be fair.
Oh, man, the things that I believe.
Yeah, I mean, the primary, to let someone know what the foundational belief for you is right now, if you were to summarize it.
Yeah, okay. Boy. So, I mean, I believe that there's a God who is defined chiefly by love. Everything for me flows out of that.
I agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I do.
Well, I think we've solved all the problems. This is a short podcast.
Season 3.
There you go. And out of that reality comes a whole host of other realities in my mind. And we could, I used to have a longer list that I believed in. I would say it's shorter now. Or ones that maybe I would I'll put it this way, willing to be wrong about. There are beliefs I have that flow out of this idea that God's reality is love, that I'm going all in on, even if I'm wrong about them. Which maybe that could take our conversation a whole different direction. But for example, I'm willing to be wrong about the fact that God invites me to participate in his project of love. If I'm gonna if you were to tell me that
it's a belief that's beyond logically being able to undermine for you.
Yeah, and I'm if you were to say to me, look, I have this chapter and verse that says no, you're not supposed to love other people. I'm gonna be I'm gonna do it anyway. Right, because I've just become convinced of the.
It's one of those things that no one could ever actually argue. They would more so argue about how to love people.
Yeah,
this is where the actual difficulty comes.
And no one could. It would be really hard to convince me away from this idea.
Yeah.
And that might seem narrow-minded and pig-headed or whatever, and that's okay. I'm fine with that.
The discussion happens at the how level though, because the Shah of Iran, the leader of America, they're all going to, or any parent is going to say they love their kids and that's why they do this. My position of what I believe in love says that you wouldn't do that. Yeah. So you don't love your kids, and that. So, but I get.
So then I've really fumbled all this up because I've probably gone over 3 paragraphs. But let me just share a few others. All right. So because God is love, He created me. I believe He created me in some act of creation. To be a relational creature, that community relationship is at the heart of God's being, and born out of that is God's desire to experience that relational reality with me for all eternity. And so there's some sense in which there was a disruption between in the relational dynamic of the universe. And so God is trying to now restore that relational reality, which many, Christians, to use a theological term, would call salvation on some level, like how that all plays out.
Yep.
I believe in a fall and then redemption and God trying to bring all things back into eternal relationship with himself. And born out of that love as well as other things that God has invited us to participate in, whether it's like rest, right? Sabbath, rest, those types of things. That's kind of the basic framework of what, I believe that Jesus is I believe Jesus is God in some way that I can't fully comprehend, and that, Jesus lived and died and rose again and, is now trying to continue his mission of bringing humanity back into reconciliation with himself. So those types of things. Is that good enough for now?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I think I would put you, my highest compliment would be I'd put you in a similar category as a C.S. Lewis type of Christian, a very intelligent, and I don't mean this as a besmirch to any Christianity at all, but...
A besmirch to him either, that I'm in his category.
But, a intellectual, curious, but talented, and a highly articulate and clear thinking, intelligent Christian.
Well, I appreciate that. I feel like some of our more conscientious, to use a term you like to use, listeners would be like, wow, this guy is so wishy-washy, and I don't know what he just said.
Sure. There's always going to be those, on either, and then there'll be people who, this guy's way too concrete,
So are we turning the tables on you now?
Yeah.
That right? So you tell us what you believe.
Okay. So
in 3 paragraphs or less.
No, I said 3. And I think this is the version that I try to write. I look at it, it's all confusing, but the idea is there. And then I feed it through Chat GPT and say, can you summarize this a little more? And then I use it as an editor and then and I'm not sure if I took that or not with this, but anyways.
You're not sure this is you or Chat GPT is what you're saying.
I'm not sure if this is the lengthy, annoying, wandering version or the one that was more succinct, but it's pretty succinct for me, I think. So first and foundationally, where I've come to say this is what I can intellectually defend as to what I believe, if you've got a couple hours, is that first, truth and love are the deepest fundamental concepts that we can clearly comprehend in wrestling with the concept of God, for one. That any definition you're going to have of God is going to be a bifurcated character of truth and love. Now, in our human experience, we call it love. I would call it relationship. The truth and the ability to relate to truth, which is consciousness, in my opinion, is the dual character of God that's unavoidable. Okay. Every religion agrees with the character of God as having these 2 qualities. To anthropomorphize the concept of God more than this without clearly defensible evidence is to make a graven image within my mind, desires, and biases for me.
Say that one again.
So the concept of a graven image.
Yeah.
To the Sabbath school going crowd, being me growing up, was more so, well, obviously that's a little statue.
Yeah.
To the, 40, almost 48-year-old me, it's a ideological concept.
Okay.
It's more of a religion than a statue.
So you're saying anything beyond love and truth in reference to God is
dangerous. Okay. In the sense that confidence is dangerous. Okay. So to me, if you don't have a defense for what you hold as a belief, that you can't start with the concepts basically at truth and love working in combination to get to the place where you hold this belief that in some sense is an admittance to allowing desire, needs, wants, biases to manipulate that concept enough into an anthropomorphized version that simply justifies your image of yourself.
Are you
graven image?
I got you. I like that. Are you, maybe this is off topic here a little, are you more worried about the reality of settling on anything beyond that in and of itself, or are you really worried about the way those things can be weaponized, or both?
Worried. What's the first one?
Just in and of themselves. Like, so in other words, you're just objecting to it on intellectual grounds, or are you
Objecting to what?
Like getting too
An
specific?
anthropomorphized version of God?
Yeah. Because these things have been used as a weapon to bring conformity, and
the one thing I should admit in as kind of like a warning label of an approach that I hold for me, that I found to work for me up to this point, as at least a recovery life ring, if you will, after being self-ejected from the boat of religious practice, is that there's still sharks in the water. Just because I've got this life ring, this is dangerous. I get it. Losing your belief structure, as Caleb put it, is like being a normal human and having the bones pulled out of you. And then all of a sudden, you're just a mush of tendons and muscle with no a difficulty for making any forward movement, because it's like your value structure all of a sudden is pulled out from underneath you. So warning label, right? But for me, this is the most engaged with the character of God that I've ever been or felt a presence of. I would be denying the call of God were I not facing this. Now, the inability for me to perceive what I currently perceive and allows me to form my character now justifiably in a better way for those who are under my care is far clearer, far easier, and far less self-centered with the belief system I have currently than a lifetime of rigid Christian principles and beliefs. I would be arrogant and ignorant to say that where I'm currently at could have been gotten to without my history of having been raised up in that. I'm not denying the value of that or the holding of those things. It's simply my path has called me to this position, and I'm responding with everything I can to hold on to what I can claim as being true.
So what I hear you saying, I really like what you said. You're merely looking at your own life and saying, I feel like I'm in a better place now with my
far better
philosophical convictions than I was before.
Right. And I don't say that as a besmirch of the quality of the theology or anything else of those who hold the position that I was previously at.
Yeah.
I admit that there is a unique personality type that has a harder time interacting with a group and holding things that have been handed to them that did not come to them through their own experience. Yeah. Especially with something so important. So
I actually resonates with me because I feel the same way in my life, where sometimes I worry that I'm drifting too much, and some people in my life like to cite the ever ubiquitous slippery slope, right? You ever hear that argument, Trent?
No, I just skated right down that slippery slope. It's people going, hey,
yeah. So for me, I'm like, oh man, maybe I am on the road to hell, you know? But I'm just like, but I think I'm a nicer person now. I think like if you were to ask my wife or kids or whatever, like maybe I'm all wrong, but I think they would say that.
Yep.
I think. So I'm like, okay, I sometimes put it this way, and this is not original to me as well, but if love is wrong, then I never want to be right. You know, like I'm going all in on love. So anyway, keep going. You're in your second paragraph, or maybe it's still your first.
First half. Okay. So that I do believe that too clear of an anthropomorphized version of God, which means to give, I'm not saying this for your sake, to give a very human form to something that is not human. So now I get it. Christ, human, sure. God, I don't know that God has a penis. Like to that level of objectification, you know, to even say that feels wrong. Well, why? Well, we refer to God as male and everything else, but not that clearly objectified. Well, I honestly, you know, I don't think it's appropriate to think of God in those terms. Now, Christ, I think, is if God is love, Christ is truth. And that's where we have this balance that I believe in that if you objectify love, you get law. The objectification of love brought into reality looks like truth. And Christ refers to himself as truth, and God is love in the most subjective sense and the most objective sense, which still falls into the pattern of the basis of what I believe. So,
so could I pause here again? So maybe you're getting to this. So putting aside Jesus,
and I'm not like full like Christ. I'm like Christ?
Truly he was the Son of God. Yeah, you're not
or
there.
more like Christ.
Yeah.
I am admittedly wanting to point in that direction because it's what I know. And I do think it is emotionally dishonest to adopt someone else's religion. Now that comes with the critique that I don't think any religion is right, but that they all serve as purpose of people working towards God. Some may be better than others, I'll admit. I don't know if I'm in the best one or not, but to jump to a religion that doesn't have the same emotional underpinnings of experience, there's something lost in that that's disingenuous. And that's why I feel like people that come to Adventism at an adult age kind of get a pass on the weird baggage of those who have to go through it through childhood. But that can be said about any religion, right? Yeah. So anyway,
but I was going to ask, so God, again, putting Jesus aside for a second and what his relation is to the whole thing. God has personhood. God is a force, is an energy, is
that uptick in your tone mean a question or statement? Okay.
Question.
I'm just not.
You're not sure yet.
Well, it's my belief at this point that I shouldn't
worry about
that.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, there's one projection that goes past truth and love for me, and that simply is that God. That's it. Like it's essentially saying the word. And then the question is, what's that mean? It means the purest, self-honest interaction of truth and love. And that is the definition of God to me, which, if that's what I limit it to, is still an accurate definition of God. So that's fair.
It's a minimal.
It's the most minimal
definition
and accurate definition of God. That's why I think that's kind of almost where this conversation can start.
Yeah.
But it does still require that we what does it mean to believe, and what is truth? And
I mean, I would push back to you say the most accurate.
It, while being 100%,
there's no error mixed in with it, is what you're saying.
Yeah, there's very little room in that statement for humans to distort it. Now, right after that is where all the distortion comes in. Well, what does that mean? Well, we get to justify God's character through our lives and how we hold our ideology and what ideology we allow to find seed in our own experience and share. And that's why we are called to defend the character of God. This is my process of defending the character of God. And if it leads to belief, so be it.
Yeah.
You know?
So for me, the reason I asked about the personhood is because I feel fairly strongly that God is a person. And that's a pretty important foundational commitment that I have. Just because I think there's all sorts of implications. But that's the reason I ask you.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not, willing to kill anyone over that idea. But that's, to me, a lot flows from that.
How it lives in your mind and thinking everything else is that God has personhood, not just consciousness, not just will, but actual physical personhood. Is not like saying accurately this is it, but when you pull it off the shelf in your thinking, that's what you pull off.
No, I mean, I would define personhood more minimally. I don't know anything. I'm ambivalent about the physical reality of it. I'm just defining personhood as someone who has their own distinct consciousness, has their own distinct will, personality, etc. I mean, I'm using the term personality to define a person.
I wouldn't. I'll kick it right there. I wouldn't imagine God has a personality.
Yeah,
he has all.
No, and I don't mean. I guess again, I'm not meaning like he's a
meaningless sidetrack on my part.
Yeah,
sorry.
no. That's a helpful clarification. What I just mean is that God is distinct from the universe. So there's
omnipresent yet distinct.
Yes. So there's different theological, philosophical systems of thinking, like pantheism, which views God as in everything and as everything. And I would just say, no, I do believe that there is a distinct person known as God. Now, as a Christian, I've then believed that this distinct person or this distinct God has three persons. But that's a whole other story, right?
Well, it's interesting. Like if we were to imagine this, you're familiar with the Flatliners book, right?
Vaguely.
Well, let's think
let's imagine that I was.
Let's think that we're in a drone looking down on a bank as a representation of our belief and thinking process. In my bank, if there's a vault, the combination lock in the door has truth and love written on it, and I don't know the combination to get into the vault. And that might be for my own benefit in my thinking. I don't know. But at this point, I'm being intellectually honest enough to say I'm leaving that locked until I learn the combination. I'm not going to break in. You have either broken in or have learned the combination, and in your bank, that door is open, and you have a clear picture into the deepest thing of the vault. Just to frame our two positions. Not to say that you broke the door open or learned the combination, but your door is open to the clearer
you're
view of God.
And you're not trying to undermine the idea that I feel like I have the door open. You're not like saying, hey, you don't have the door open.
No, I would admit that both of us have an imagination that receives input from reality that we're trying to verify is actually accurate. From the last time I saw Shawn Brace, you're still pretty accurate. And so this is a good verification that this is still, Now my concept of God, I haven't been able to go on the other side of the vault and then come back out and go back. And so it's for me, that door, hopefully I can open that door and have a clear picture of God
I'm also
someday.
willing to admit maybe I don't really have the door open.
Yeah, and mine might be open, but for some reason I think it's closed, It's a difficult process, this thing called consciousness.
Yeah. But anyway, you're still working on this definition. I keep apologizing, and I don't want to keep us all day.
So let's see. Defensible evidence, make graven image. So graven image of God beyond the vault door. For me, at this point, I just have a little, for me, I know I have to respect the clarity of what's beyond for my personality type right now. But I know that what's behind there is valuable, and we share that in common. It's in the vault for both of us. For me, I need to work on that combination, I think. So I believe this subtle desire for comfort of clarity that is present in religious practice is satanic in nature. So if you're allowing comfort to be the driving force in unlocking that door, that's a self-centered motivation. But if that discomfort is enough to run your life off the tracks, I understand why there needs to be some compensation in there or way of surviving until that discomfort can be healed. It's complex. So it is to allow my deepest conceptions of truth, meaning, and purpose to be perverted by my desires and biases because I brought a graven image of God too close to my desire, and the biases with clarity of my picture of God look an awful lot like me. So when I start to see God look like me, there's something's wrong. When I feel a light, I see myself more clearly. When I start to see God more clearly and it looks like me, that's a different thing. So,
as someone has put it, it's really convenient that God hates all the same people you hate, right?
That's a good one. Let's see. This gravity of my desire and bias will distort and pervert the image of God if it comes too close to resemble man. So, definition of God, truth and belief, and I hold that at arm's length intellectually currently, and that might change someday. Second, I believe there is truth outside of our consciousness, and that our purpose is to outline truth by honestly relating to it with our life. The most positive form of this process is called acting in love. So you're using love to define truth, this concept that is both the underpinning bifurcated character of God, truth and love. And, God gives us that, in my opinion, from out of the vault cometh the ability, consciousness to relate to truth and to make that not a self-centered thing, but a truth-centered thing, I think is the call of God.
You know what? There's a problem.
Uh-oh. There always is.
I don't know what the topic is for the next episode, but what is love?
Well,
we don't have enough time to unpack all of that, I don't think. But we're throwing it around like we assume we have the same definition.
I would clean that term, or not clean it. I would strip that term down and refer to it as relationship, and to take it outside of my to not ask a fish about water. I would say truth and love translate to truth and relationship. Think of it in the reality of at the atomic level. The truth of an atom is mostly held in the nucleus of the protons and the neutrons. But they are in strong relationship to the electrons that are everywhere and nowhere all at once. So the most complex weirdness that is love, is relationship, is that weird thing that's indefinable everywhere at once and nowhere. And then there's this more truth-centered thing about it. Now, if I look at my life, I'm born completely capable of relationship, but incapable of comprehending really any truth other than relationship when I'm born. Now, as life goes on, my ability to comprehend truth increases, and my emotional presence can drastically decrease. And you can come to a place where you're skeptically cold and feelingless, but highly articulate and intellectual. There's this balance in everything, and it's reflected in masculine, feminine, truth, relationship, all of it. So that's where this kind of upside down pyramid, if you think about it that way, of belief and structure comes for me. So.
Okay.
All right, almost through there. Let's see, the love, which I would clean down to relationship to get closer, but we'll put that on the list. It is the process of translating our subjective abstract experience into a more concrete, utilitarian, objective understanding of what is true. I believe this is the sacred call to be honest or to justify the character of God. So if God is truly the combination of truth and love, we should be living our lives as primarily honest to truth in love. So this requires that you admit hard truths to yourself about your experience with your reality, your character, your desires, and beware of your own biases while attempting to outline what is true. This process of moving from subjective to objective is the process of life It is the process of art. It is the process of religion. In religion, we relate to it more in terms of nominalization and denominalization. So, prophets nominalize experience into revelation to then in denominations that translate that back into the world. I consider nominalization to be the work of a prophet and denominalization to be the work of a priest or congregation. In Protestant culture, these processes have become much more individualized, which is why we have so many denominations, in my opinion. Third, I believe our concept of will as being free or determined is closely tied to the laws at the level of reality being considered. So the response time of said laws being broken and the resulting chickens coming home to roost results are the measurement of the degree of free will being present in the system. There is an elasticity to laws. At the atomic level, the chickens come home to roost with a response time in the nanoseconds, and it's immediate. At the chemical level, they have a degree more of elasticity. At the molecular level, there's even more elasticity. And the time measurement of response to laws being broken at the human level, or in consciousness or human relationship levels, there's an increasingly longer lag time of chickens coming home to roost in response to the laws that have been established. So that's a very evolutionary take, I would imagine, on an ideology framing the existence of the perception of free will, potentially.
Okay.
I don't know that it's accurate, but free will or will in general is one of the foundational points of conversation, it seems, in the belief spectrum. So I figured fair to throw that in there. And it'll be interesting for me to come back and look at this after a series of conversations. But so all that's there. If you have further questions about that, great. If not, we should try and come up with at least the first concept to actually, where do you start this conversation now that we've kind of laid groundwork between the two of us, essentially.
Yeah. So the first concept
in discussing, hey, what do you believe? So you don't get tripping over acceptance of throwing a word out in a sentence that requires more discussion.
Okay.
And the easiest way to do that is to say no religious words, but let's work towards using one religious word at a time, which is to say theological or whatever else as well. And so maybe even before that, what is the value in doing this process? We've kind of discussed that, but for people listening, I find the value in that process to be it requires that you define every single thing that you use to justify what you believe, which is a Christian biblical call to be able to do. So for half of the audience or for the two people watching, this, no matter your position of atheist or believer, this is very important regardless. So my idea here is that this kind of concept is very good no matter your position. So that's my value in it. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. I cringe. One of the things that I try to do in the communities that I lead, religious communities I lead, is I didn't use the word church. So that's a reflection of what I try to do. Okay. But I didn't define religion either. I didn't define community. But the religious communities, it's like an infinite regress. We could just keep going all the way down.
Yeah.
But the religious communities that I lead, I'm trying to help people not use terms that they just assume everyone knows.
Right.
So I am a huge fan of this. And the more we can understand what we really mean. Now, again, there is to some degree an infinite regress because language itself is evolving and changes, and there is no way that we have 100% certainty. To go back to the previous topic, there's no way that we can have 100% certainty that even when we try to define our terms, the terms we use to define our terms, we agree upon.
Right.
But that's where there's this provisionality, but some level of, I like the word confidence, but I'm picking up that.
Well, it's a relational word on quality of evidence.
So I have some level of confidence that we can have some level of understanding. We can't have exhaustive understanding of each other, but we can at least have a good faith understanding of each other, which is, I think, is very important. So I'm all in on that. I love that. Yeah.
Cool. So what would be the first most foundational thing to discuss? Is it love? Is it truth? Is it will? Or is it words versus names, because it's the substrate that we have to work in, first and foremost?
Yeah.
On and on and on.
Oh man, I mean.
So, and you have an appointment. You have to be out in about another 24 minutes or 20. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, so we got 20 minutes to find just one word to talk about.
Oh man. Oh boy. I mean, I am tempted by that last one you mentioned, but I don't know how. I don't know how we would even tackle it. Just the idea of language.
I think it might be appropriate because it's in the cleanest sense, it's not religious at all. It's just spoken word. But the concepts behind why we're using words and what they mean, and for me, the trigger for me in understanding and diving into this is that you can't use names in Scrabble. And it's like, well, why not? We all know how to spell it.
Yeah.
Why can't we use it? You start to think about it and you realize, like, okay, either, we all existed at once and we don't get to think about really the rationality of how we go from not having words to having words because we were created in an instant, or you have to think of it evolutionarily and figure it out that way. And I can draw a line intellectually where I can think and imagine and pull from other people's experiences that I've heard from to argue that auditory utterances are always names first until they become words to be so commonly held between people, but so that's a different.
I think language is intimately connected with consciousness. I mean, consciousness itself is obviously a huge part of what we're talking about here. And consciousness and speech are, I don't know how you can separate them. What is consciousness
if you don't have speech?
If you don't have speech.
Have you heard the TED Talk with the woman? She's PhD level something or other. She gave a TED Talk on how she lost her ability to use speech from a car wreck or something for a few years. She's extremely articulate now, doesn't have any, she seems like she should be on a TED Talk. But what she said, the thing that you're left with is that during the time when she didn't have the use of articulate thinking, her memories were extremely vague, but they're very, very emotionally present memories. And they're memories that stay with her longer and more deeply because she's not able to articulate them out into a storage facility of mental accuracy, right? So there's this weird thing there.
Well, it raises an interesting point that, human beings, and I would say especially those, I hate going back to the Enlightenment. Will you forgive me for doing it?
We all got to have our thing to go back to this
is kind of my hobby horse right now.
Yeah.
Those heavily influenced by the Enlightenment, which is to say, and this term itself, can kind of be challenging, but Western society, whatever that means.
Yeah.
We give primacy to knowledge, to language, to speech, to ideas, and there is an emotionality that we maybe bypass a little bit.
Yeah.
I read a book about the limbic system. There's a way to communicate with each other that bypasses speech, right? Bypasses language. And human beings can actually affect other human beings. On some level.
Are we talking essentially like body language and presence of attitude?
Even physiologically, not to get all gross here, but like women, if they spend a lot of time with each other, what happens?
Yeah, they get on the same cycle.
They get on the same cycle. This is like
pheromone kind of thing.
Yeah, this has nothing to do with any language. So So on the one hand, we are like what does separate us from other animals is our ability to put concepts together, language,
to an exaggerated degree.
Yeah,
a massively increased degree.
Like on a hyper steroid, way.
We're the thing that outlines us as saying there's value in protecting and projecting us into being even better. Is to say that we are the highest level of consciousness that we can empirically put our hands on at this point. And our aim is to be like God and to look backwards and to, we would find with a concept of God that we pretty much hold commonly, we would say that God was at the beginning, that we can find God there, but we also find God in what we're reaching towards. And so in that sense, the lived experience and how language translates out of that and how we construct our value structure, the thing that really outlines us as special is most present in spoken language, it seems, because it holds our ideological concepts, our picture of reality, our picture of meaning, all of that.
Yeah, and I would say so on the one hand, language is extremely important, obviously. On the other hand, there's a sense in which we deny other forms of reality, of communication, of, psychologists call it limbic revision. Like just holding somebody can often go a lot farther than trying to speak. We know how this works.
I'll go hug Amber for 20 seconds. I'll just count.
I know.
Exactly. What are you doing? I was like, the 20 seconds. And afterwards, it's just different.
Exactly. 100%. So on the one hand, we don't want to make language and speech and logic the whole thing.
Right.
But at the same time, it is obviously critically important because it is what is made us what we are today. Yeah. So to me, it is a fascinating phenomenon, like consciousness, language. Like, you talk about whether we're created that way, whether we evolved that way. Either way, it's probably a little of both, right? Because language evolves and we have better words, but even the fact that there's a way that we can speak that also affects our emotionality, right? Yeah. Like you can use different words, and that in and of itself has so much power.
Or if I started singing right now at you, what I wanted to say, it would be such a highly elevated emotional state that it would just be supremely awkward. But there's this weird thing in music that this high degree of both emotional and intellectual combination that is the magic that is music. That's hard to, the combination of everything that is in an expression coming out of a human is.
But I would say, just to kind of put this out there, like language itself doesn't have, and I'm not a linguist, so I'm not an expert in this, right? But language itself does not have objective, it's not objectively true. And this is what can be troubling.
It's like time. There's no such thing as time. We just made a measurement. You know what we base time off of now? Is just a vibration, an atomic vibration. It's highly accurate because it's such a low amplitude wavelength. That's the smallest, and we have atomic, but it's still not actually anything we can define other than this thing going from here to here. Time is a measurement of relationship at its core.
And that's what words are in many ways. It doesn't have its own objective reality.
We make the measurement of time. We also make the word a measurement of the subjective emotional experience that we hold in common.
And corresponding to something that is outside of ourselves, right?
Right.
So we call this a table.
The word becomes the thing outside of us that okay, this is a word, but you're a name. You're not concrete. I have to be in relationship with you to be able to hold a definition of you. If I'm going to respect that you have free will, I think that's where that keys in, is that a name is a way of protecting something that has its, at least an acknowledgement from the person saying it, that this is a thing that is only able to be known through relationship. not through definition.
But I would say, to take it in a one direction, like, to me, the reality of us being language people, to me, reflects this idea that there is a being or a God that is itself communicating. So where would, I mean, again, you could bring an evolutionary argument, but just the ability even to be able to have language, to be able to use speech, to me, is a fairly persuasive argument that there is a God that communicates.
All right, I'm going to put your feet to the fire on that one. Like, well, so I go to first all right, dolphins have language, dogs have language. It's just at a much grosser level of articulation. Like, it's like, oh no. And yes, they get like, wee. That's about as accurate as the dogs get, we just get more accurate. Or, okay, now then we're not able to define ourselves as uniquely different, just more advanced.
Yeah, and that's okay.
And see, now I turn that back around then, and I say, then we're all in the same line, and we all have the same holiness of life, responding to truth within us. But it's that since we have such a high degree of language articulation, we can build this next thing called ideology, which guides us to be more moral and to act as a counteractive. We're saddled with the counteractive reaction to evolutionary survival by the fittest, I guess you would say. Because in most cases, a religious practice runs counterintuitive to the survival of the fittest. As far as like you have, I can take, I survive. It's more of a protection of the overall good. So in that sense, ideology rather than words would, to me, be the marker of us being unique. In a sense.
I don't think I'm making the argument that God exists because human beings have this unique ability to communicate. I don't think that's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, I think even the ability of animals to communicate reflects, to me, some communicator that designed the universe in such a way that information could be where does information come from? Right?
Well, that's one of the things that truly exist. Like there's what is it? But the other things were obvious, and then the one that was not obvious to me, like, oh, information exists, but it's not anything other than a concept, but it is another thing that exists. So that's almost like a entrance ramp or an exit to the spiritual realm, in a sense, So
so that's where I'm coming. I'm not trying to prove God's existence. I'm just saying, like, if it's interesting to me, and especially like from a biblical perspective, much is made of God speaking. Like God creates through speech, according to the narrative of the Bible and places. Even Jesus is referred to as the Word.
Yeah, when you get into it, like especially in the Genesis account and everything else, even in looking at it in the kind of skeptical position that I take, it still all overlays fairly consistently, which is the thing to me that then is like, all right, okay,
it's interesting,
noted.
Yeah, yeah. So that's an underlying part of the narrative, is the communicating nature of this God, and
that there is relationship, and it's not just into your conscious, I'm conscious, and you cause emotions and I receive emotions and cause emotions. It's that there's actual intent and communication between the two. Even if it's at a reduced level, there's still this degree of intense connectivity within communication and relationship that is something that is like a fish in water for us because we are so immersed in it that it's hard to really even identify it. But it's as you're saying, a driving force for a reason, for belief as one of the pillars of an argument for, I would say.
Yeah.
Okay. Now you're going to need to go soon. So
yes, sir.
I would say whenever we can do this next in 2 weeks or so, that we would be thinking your homework assignment while you're busy with all the other things.
I have a lot of driving, so I have a lot of time to think.
Driving and podcast, man, I love that. Now I don't mind driving. But the concept and the relationship of what we're using language for, names and words, and that would be an appropriate next conversation to kind of outline the deeper importance of them. I'd imagine you'd have more authoritative knowledge than I'm going to have in that you have, actual training in these things. But I think it would be good to talk about that and then edging towards understanding like a foundational concept of God that we can both agree on within starting to understand truth and love and will. They're all in there somewhere, but I do think kind of pulling apart as much as possible the use of language and names, words, to then probably which comes next, truth or like it's a chicken and egg situation with truth and relationship too.
Yeah,
so
it is.
Tune in.
Yes, boy, they're on the edge of their seats, these listeners.
The really weird thing to me is that one of the reasons for me keeping truth in that definition of God is that there's no definition for truth other than relationship. Because anything you use to define truth in any attempt at explanation has itself to be truth. So there's only as you were saying earlier, the quality of experience that is that deep rationality for an argument to even engage in this type of discussion. Is that the only way you have for defining truth is through experience. Okay, and now is truth only found in experience? Not what I mean. Well, but so tune in next week for another difficult conversation to understand.
There you go.
And the only way to find the opposite of, I can understand the opposite of love. Like the opposite of truth is a lie. There's only lies to be found if there is life, which tells me a weird thing about us that I don't quite know how to understand, that lies only exist if there's life. There's no, like camouflage is a lie. And that's fine, but it can only happen if there's conscious life trying to be, which is interesting. So anyways, Shawn, thank you so much. Trent. And let's do this again very soon.
Sounds like a plan.